Hello everybody, I'm Nick, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can implement JSON Web Token or JWT Authentication in your .NET applications. And we're not only going to focus on how we can do it in a simplistic way, we're going to see that too, but we're also going to take it a step further and show you how you can generate tokens by integrating a third-party service that does token management and user creation, authentication, authorization, and all that for our behalf, as well as a hosted website for people to create an account or restore a forgotten password and so on, which is very much what you would do in a real-life application and in a more traditional OAuth 2 flow. We're not going to focus too much on OAuth 2, we're just going to see how to integrate with it, but we're going to see how you would integrate with a real service, which is a universally agreed standard. And if you learn to do it this way, it will be very easy for you to do it any other way. Now, AWS is sponsoring this video, and AWS is a sponsor of the .NET community in general. So for that reason, I'm going to be using AWS Cognito as that service that does all the user management and the token generation and all that. But you can use any other service you want. The standard is pretty universal. If you want to check out how you can get $25 worth of free credit on AWS, check the link in the description. And let me show you what I have here. I have two applications. The first one is this weather API, which, as you can probably see, is just a bog standard API. It doesn't really have anything fancy. And this is the API we will be adding authentication. Basically, we will say that a logged in user should be able to access this weather endpoint, no one else, just to keep it very simple. And the other one is the identity API, which, as I'm starting this video, I will use to generate and show you how you can generate manually JSON Web Tokens, which is still extremely common. So if you're accepting a username and a password and you want to create a token for your user, you'd use something exactly like this. So let's see how you can implement. Now, .NET doesn't have native JSON Web Token integration, so you have to add a NuGet package, and that is the Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Authentication.JWT bearer. So we're going to start by adding that, and then I'm going to create a new class, and I'm going to call it Token Generator. So this is the class you would use after you validated things like, let's say, the username and the password, make sure that matches, and you would check it against a database or something. And then you would use this service with all the information you might have for your user to generate a token, a JSON Web Token. Now, if you don't know what a JSON Web Token is, I've made so many videos about the subject, so I'm not going to explain what it is. You can check out those. But fundamentally, it's a piece of string that has three parts: a description about the algorithm and the token, we call that the header, then the data, which is this one, the purple one, and then the signature, which is verified to ensure authenticity on the content of that token, to make sure basically that this was generated by someone we can trust, and we can trust anything in this token because the token itself is encoded, it is not encrypted. Anyone can say it and anyone can change any of those details. I can say Nick Doe over here, for example, and as you can see, this string is changing because a new content is generating using the algorithm over here, because it is just basically encoded, and then a signature has to be verified to make sure that the token is authentic. So that's the idea. So in here, I'm going to create a new class called public string generate token. And I'm only going to pass down the email of the user. The reason for that is I want to keep it very simple. It's very common to also have things like the user ID, because you might want to have that too in the token. It makes integration with other systems very easy. We're not going to use a user ID for this example, but I'm going to show you how you would use it if you had it. So first things first, we need a token handler. We're going to say new JWT security token handler. And a lot of the functionality is based on that. In fact, this is the class that will generate the final string we just saw on JWT.io. The first thing we need is a key, because for this example, I'm going to use a symmetric key, basically a key that both me, the application signing this or creating this token, and the consuming application need to have pre-communicated and know, because the validation of the token and the signature is happening on the client side. So I'm going to create a string and I'm going to call it, for the love of God, store and load this securely. You would use something like AWS Security Manager, for example, to store it and load it securely. And then I need it to be a byte array. So I'm going to say to array, here we go. And then I'm going to need something called claims. Claims define things about the contents for this token. It's the payload stuff that you saw on that JWT.io page. So I'm going to say var claims equals new list of claim. Here we go. And then I'm going to say that I have a new claim, and then claims have a type and a value. The type is basically telling you what that thing is supposed to represent. So I'm going to say JWT registered claim names because there's many names that are pretty standard in JWT. So I'm going to say JTI or JSON token ID. This is a unique identifier for this token, and I can simply say new GUID.toString here. This can be used for things like token invalidation, for example. If you need to blacklist the token and so on, you can use the JTI and then you can do the invalidation on your side. Then you would have something called a subject. Usually this is the email or the user ID. So if I was using a user ID, I would have said user ID.toString. And then you can have details, for example, about the user. So I can say email and pass down the email. And now I have a few information about my user. Once I have that, I need a token descriptor. This is a new security token descriptor. And I'm going to define a few things about my token here. The first thing I'm going to have is the subject. So I'm going to say new subject, claims identity, and I'm going to pass down my claims. Then I'm going to say, hey, when does this token expire? JWTs are usually short-lived. Imagine, I don't know, max an hour, usually way shorter, around 10 to 15 minutes. And they're usually used in conjunction with refresh tokens. So you can retroactively refresh a JWT that is expired and get a new JWT. So I'm going to say date time .utc now .add minutes, and I'm going to say 60. And then I'm going to say issuer, basically who issued, who created this token. Let's say that this identity service is the identity service of DomeTrain. And then we have the audience, who is this token intended for. Let's say that this is intended for the main DomeTrain application. And then I'm going to say signing credentials, and I can define how I want to sign this token. Now, I can use a certificate, which is very, very common. As you can see, we have the X509 signing credentials here. Or I can say signing credentials and use the symmetric key approach. So I can say new symmetric key. RSA is also extremely popular, but we're just going to use a symmetric key. We're going to pass down over here the key, as you can see. And then we're going to define the security algorithm we used here. So we're going to say security algorithms, and I'm going to use the HMAC SHA-256 signature over here. And that is it. The hard part is now done. All we need now is the token. So we're going to say token handler dot create token. We're going to pass down the token descriptor, and then we're going to return the token itself. So token handler dot write token. And this will return that long string that you saw. In fact, just to demo it, I'm going to go to program.cs and I'm going to say app.map post. I'm going to put this on the login endpoint, and I'm going to say logging request over here, so request. And then we're going to inject the token generator. So token generator, I'm going to have to add it as a singleton in this case. So add singleton so it can be injected. Token generator, here we go. And then I'm just going to use the Lambda syntax to return the new, and I'm going to create an anonymous object, access token equals token generator dot generate token. And we're going to pass down just the email over here. So I'm just going to get the email, and I'm going to remove the user ID and replace it with an email over here because I don't want to overcomplicate this example. So I'm just going to keep it very, very simple. So let's just do that. Here we go. And now I'm going to just run this application and show you the generated token. Assume that this login method will actually use the email and the password and then some password validator to ensure that the credentials are valid first and then create the token. You don't just create the token to anybody that's saying I'm Nick at dometrain.com. You have to validate the request and then you create the token. And now I'm going to go to Insomnia and click the login button. And as you can see now, I'm getting an access token back. You can add other things like refresh tokens and so on. But in terms of the basics, that's more than enough. If I now go back to JWT.io and paste that new token, I see my algorithm, I see the type, and then I can see more of my claims. So JSON web token identifier is here. The subject, which is who this token refers to, is here. The email, now we have not valid before. So this token is not valid before this date, and it expires on this date. Then I have the issued time when it was issued. We have the issuer and we have the audience, who it is intended for. And then in the end, we have the signature. We can paste down our secret and this will validate our token. So that's the fundamental. And now you need to see how you can actually use this token in the consumption side. So let's go ahead and implement that on the weather API. So we will need the same NuGet package because that's what's used on the consuming side. We're going to go to the program.cs and add a few standard calls over here. The first thing we want to add is services.add authorization over here. And the second thing is builder.services.add authentication, and we're going to specify a default scheme. So we're going to say bearer defaults dot authentication scheme, and then we're going to chain the add bearer, and we're going to configure everything about this authentication scheme. Now, to keep it basic, I'm going to keep the token validation property over here. And I'm going to add three things you sort of expect. The issuer signing key, which is what we used when we created the key. Remember, this is a symmetric key validation approach. So we have to know the key that was used to sign it in this way because it is using the SHA-256 algorithm. Then we have the valid issuer and the valid audience. So if it is issued for someone else, it doesn't mean that we want to use it. We want to make sure that this is issued for us. And then we're going to add a few validation things. So validate the key, validate the lifetime, validate the issuer, and validate the audience. And in terms of basic authentication, that is it. Then all you need to say is app.use authentication and app.use authorization. Here we go. And then to say that this endpoint needs to be authorized, we're going to say require authorization. And that is it. Now I can run my identity API and I can run my weather API over here. And I don't even need to generate a new token because that token I made before is still valid for 60 minutes. So I'm just going to copy this token, try to get the weather without specifying any token. I'm going to get a 401 unauthorized. I can't get it because I said this endpoint requires authentication and the default authentication is the bearer approach. So if I place my bearer token over here on the bearer token type authentication, if I paste it, then I can call the API and I'm getting authenticated to use it. If I changed any of the values on this token over here, like E is not lowercase e, but uppercase E, then I can't use it because the token is not validated correctly from the signature validation that's happening on my API. So that's now done. This is how you can very easily implement bearer authentication in your application. But that is not enough for me. I want to show you more. I want to show you how you can add a more complex flow. Now, the great thing is that nothing will really change on this side of things. The only thing that changes is the validation parameters that the token needs to deal with, and then whatever needs to change on the client side that will generate that token. Now, like I said, we're going to use an AWS service to represent that token generation aspect, and we're going to use AWS Cognito, which can do this very, very easily. The way Cognito works is we're going to have to create a user pool, and you can define many things here. For example, federated identity providers. You can say login with Facebook, Google, login with Amazon, login with Apple, login with SAML. So you can add any other provider you might want, like Okta, add OpenID Connect. You can add anything you want. We're not going to do that because I'm going to keep it fairly simple, even in the scope of using a new service. But we will say that we want to have email signing. So we're going to say, yeah, email should be checked. Then I customize the requirements for my password. So minimum length 8, and then one number, one special character, one uppercase, and one lowercase is mandatory by default, but I can change it and customize anything I want. Again, I think these are fine defaults, so I'm going to use them. I can also have MFA or multi-factor authentication. We don't need to do that, but it is supported natively. I'm just going to disable it. And then we can have things like self-service account recovery. So things like implementing a forgot my password button for the application, and then delivery methods, email, SMS, email, and SMS, and so on. Then I'm going to say that, yeah, I allow self-registration. I allow users to be registered on their own, and I will allow Cognito to automatically send messages to verify and confirm. And I'm also going to say that I want to keep any original values. And I'm also going to say that I want more information about the user. For example, I want a full name. You can have a nickname, you can have a phone number, you can allow them to provide and get more from the user. I'm just going to say that get the name. And you can also have custom attributes if you want, up to 50. And trust me, 50 is more than you will ever need if you're doing this right. So I'm just going to say that this is totally fine. Then we have an ability to configure SCS, or the simple email service, for sending our emails, but I'm gonna keep it simple and allow Cognito to send the emails for me directly. This is just for development. It is not something you should put in production, and it's even defined over here because you can use it to send up to 50 emails a day. It's not supposed to be the thing you use in production, but because I'm just making a video here, I don't need to set up SES. And then I'm going to create the pool name. So I'm just gonna say demo pool over here. And I'm also going to enable hosted UI. I'm going to allow AWS to host a website for me. And the great thing about it is you can actually customize that website if you want. You can add your logo and so on. It's really, really cool what you get out of the box. I don't have to customize the domain too much. I'm just going to say HTTPS and then domain auth and all that jazz. And you can choose to have a public client for things like browsers and mobile applications and so on, or confidential client, for example, for a server-side application, which is something that if you want me to explore in the future, please leave a comment down below and let me know. It's a very interesting topic, but I'm going to keep it as a public client here. And I'm going to say the app name, so demo app in this case. And then I'm going to say that I want a client secret to be generated because I'm going to use that to authorize my API requests to the Cognito API. Then callback URLs, I'm going to say dometrain.com. After authentication, I'm going to go back to this URL, and you can use this URL to grab a code, which you can then use to validate a bunch of things about your token. And then in terms of advanced client settings, you can customize things like how long the session of the authentication flow can take, default refresh token expiration, which we get out of the box, default access token expiration, which is 60 minutes by default, ID token expiration, and so on. You have so much control. And I'm going to say just next. The last page is just to verify that what we have here is correct, and I think it is. So I'm going to say create user pool, and that is it. Now we have our user pool, and now we have a bunch of information about our system, but I'm going to go to the app integration and scroll all the way down to the app client name. As you can see, we have a client ID, we have a client secret over here, and then we also have our hosted UI. In fact, I can use this UI if I click this to now create an account. This is hosted on AWS and it comes out of the box and I can customize this. So for example, to sign up, all I have to say is nick@dometrain.com, then name is Nick Chapsas, and you can see the password validation is native, and then I'm going to use a strong password and I'm going to say sign up. Now this will send an email to my account to validate that I'm actually owning this account. I'm going to copy and paste that key, then I'm going to say confirm my account. And now it is confirmed and I'm back on Dometrain, which by the way, we just launched a free 7-day trial giving you access to 10 of our courses for free. Check it out, link in the description. But we also got a code over here, which is going to be very useful because we're going to use that code to generate a JSON web token through Cognito. Now let's bring all of that together. I'm going to go to Insomnia again and I'm going to use Cognito to generate my endpoint. Now the URL I want to call is, I'm going to get this URL over here from one step higher. So I'm going to go over here. So this is the route I need to call. And in fact, I called Dometrain, not Dometrain, which means I'm going to have to use this URL over here with the misspelled brand name, which is a bit embarrassing. But anyway, I'm going to paste that here and then OAuth 2 and then token. That's a post request. And I need some body parameters, but the body is represented as a URL encoded form. And it contains these parameters over here. So a grant type, which needs to be authorization code, a client ID, which we will get, as you remember, if we go into the client app, by clicking on this and copying this client ID. So I'm going to just paste it here. Then the client secret, it is this one over here. I'm just going to take it and paste it over here. And then the code, which is what was generated on this URL. So I'm going to take that and paste it over here. And then the redirect URI is where we said we're going to go back. So I'm going to call that endpoint. And now I have an ID token, an access token, which is that JSON web token. And in fact, I'm going to just copy this because I want to show you what's inside. And then we also have a refresh token, which we can use to get a new JSON web token. So I'm going to go back to JWT.io and I'm going to paste this new token. And we have now an RSA algorithm to validate our signature. And then we have our subject, which is the user ID. We have the issuer, which is, again, Cognito. We have a version, we have a client ID. We have an origin JSON token ID. We have an event ID, token use access. We have scope. So phone, OpenID, and email. We have the auth time, and we have a bunch of other parameters, including the username. All that completely for free out of the box from Cognito. By the way, if we wanted to refresh this token we just generated with our new refresh token, if I just duplicate this over here and I say refresh token, I'm just gonna quickly show you the flow. So let's create that, click on it. This authorization code needs to be refresh token over here. So the grant type is refresh token. We still have the client ID and the secret, but we don't need the code anymore because we have that refresh token. So I'm gonna delete that. And we also don't need the redirect URI. So I'm gonna remove that. And I'm going to add the refresh token over here, which I will get from this. So let's just copy all that over here, select it, copy it here, go to refresh, and then just paste the token over here and say send. And as you can see, this says now okay, and we have a new ID token and a new access token. Here we go. And in fact, I can use the auth2 and then user info endpoint, and I can pass down the auth token as the bearer and then specify my client ID and the client secret. So client ID is here and client secret is here, and I can get some details about the user. Now I do have to replace this misspelled DOM Tryon with the correct URL. And now you can see I have the subject, which is the user ID, email verified true, user, and also email. And if I go back to Cognito and I go to the user pool and I refresh, then as you're going to see here, I can see my user as you would see your application's user. I can click on it, I can see all the details, I can add more claims and so on. So I can edit the attributes, group memberships. You can do many, many cool things with Cognito. But how do you validate this token and use it in your application? Well, let's take a look. The only thing that mainly changes is this configuration over here. Now, because the code will be in the description down below, you might want to grab it and use it. I'm going to quickly just comment this out, and this will represent the old JWT from identity API, which is what you might be using in some use cases. And then I'm going to specify how we can validate this JSON Web Token coming from Cognito. Now, in terms of things I want to have here, I want to have that require HTTPS metadata is false because I don't want to mess with HTTPS because it's hard working with development and having a work in HTTPS, which is why these applications also don't have it. And then I'm going to validate the key, the lifetime, the issuer, and the audience over here. And I'm also going to say include error details. And there's two things I need to add to basically tell this application how to validate the token. The first thing is the authority. If you played Baldur's Gate 3, you know what I'm talking about. If not, this makes no sense to you. And what goes here is the following. We're going to go back over here, and I'm going to go to the user pool, and I'm going to go and copy this first part of the URL all the way to the EU West 2, and this weird thing is the user pool ID. That is what you need over here. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it here. So that's the authority. And then I'm going to say metadata address, which again starts with the authority. This is getting old. And then / well-known and OpenID configuration. And that is it. Now what I'm going to do is run the weather API. Here we go. I'm going to change nothing else. I'm going to prove that the old token doesn't work because now we use the new one. So if I just try to call it again with this old token, because configuration changed, it can't really validate this token anymore. But I can get my refreshed token over here and copy it. And if I go back over here to this get weather endpoint and I put it in the auth bearer token header, then as you can see, I'm getting the response. If anything changes, if I say that this is not valid, then here we go, we get unauthorized. And if I call it again, it works absolutely fine. I think this is an incredibly easy to implement this type of authentication. It can be really hard in other programming languages and frameworks. .NET makes it fairly simple once you understand how it works and once you work with the right tools. So if you want to grab the code, I'm going to put a link in the description. You can just download it and keep it. And it will give you a good way to start with this type of authentication. But now I wonder from you, what service are you using? And are you on something like Identity Server? Are you using things like Keycloak? Leave a comment down below and let me know. Well, that's all I have for you for this video. Thank you very much for watching. And as always, keep coding.